Hi there, YouTube. Well, I took a 20-minute drive to the beach I show you and walked away from it because I couldn't record there. It was way too windy. So I walked about a mile away and now I'm lying here in high grass, chilling out in the sun. And it's kind of warm when I can't feel the wind actually. And I want to address the apathy that Sarahon was talking about in his video. I had the same apathy for quite some time, and I was just as negative as him about the state and everything. And well, it didn't really get me much. I was very angry at times and really lashing out at just about everybody. And then one day a friend of mine told me she had enough of listening to my lashing out. Gave me a phone number for a journalist and told me to call him about the thing that I had problems with at that time, which is a long story, but suffice to say is that I was at a period unemployed and I had some problems with the social office at the town hall. They were treating not only me but everybody else that was unemployed with worse than shit. And some of the things they did were actually against the law. And I was just raging and didn't know where to put my rage. But my friend gave me this telephone number and I called this reporter about my problems with the town hall workers, social workers not keeping up the law. And he thought it was an interesting story, so he came out with himself and a camera crew, and they filmed me while I told my story. And then they went to one of the social workers, and who was the one in charge of all this shit, and interviewed him too, and he pwned himself like really hard because he didn't know the law. I actually at that time studied that part of the law and found that it was not the best of laws, but it was better than the shit they were putting us through. So he pwned himself. And I started seeing that I actually had some power because things started to change after that. Not much, a little. So that sort of gave me the incentive to keep on doing what I was already doing. And let me just say this, that I had an impact I wouldn't have dreamed of having without being part of an NGO or a party or something. Just because I was fucking stubborn and because I didn't want to let go. I was like a fucking bulldog. And they did a lot of stuff that was not quite legal, and I pointed this out to them. I didn't react, and I called the journalist again, and he made another interview and stuff like that. And at the time, I was living out in the countryside, pretty far from where I grew up. And what happened was that the local newspaper, which is actually quite big, around 180,000 readers of it, it's not a free newspaper, but it's a sort of a local newspaper for that area where I live. And they called me up and asked if I was interested in them making a portrait of me. And I said, sure, why not? So they came out and journalists interviewed me and they took my pictures and stuff. He had a photographer with him too. And the article was 1.5 page with a picture of me, and it was a fairly accurate portrait about me as a Copenhagener moved out into the countryside and stirring up shit. And it fucking worked. All this work I did, it took me like a couple of years to get that far, but it worked. It really worked. They stopped treating people like shit. They started, I forced them to implement some social works to help those of the unemployed who had other problems than unemployment, like alcoholism and post-traumatic stress syndrome and whatnot. And finally, some of them got the help that they had been wanting for like 7 years. And one of the projects these town hall social workers were doing was actually so illegal that, and I raised such a fuss about it, that one of the members of parliament brought it up and questioned the work minister about it, if this could be true. So it actually had so much impact that what I was fighting for out there in the countryside, like really far out in the countryside, got into the ears of a politician in parliament, and he brought up the questions and asked some pretty harsh questions of the work minister at the time. And shortly after that, a reporter from one of the biggest newspapers in Denmark called me up, and we did a telephone interview, and that was like a whole page of the shit that was going on in that commune and in that part of the country. And what came out of that was that the organization, one of the NGOs that I'm a member of, called the Danish, translated roughly in English, the Danish Organization for Unemployed, got a bigger voice out of this. And the first couple of years I didn't really use that NGO very much, but after a while I got to be one of their more prominent members, one of the more outspoken ones. And a couple of years ago they actually asked me if I wanted to be member of the board of this NGO, and I had to refuse at the time because I was too busy doing other stuff, political stuff that is. So apathy just doesn't get you anywhere. You have to find the rage and the indignation and then use that energy in the right way. You have to channel it the right way. And maybe it's the way I did it, maybe it's something else, I don't know, I can't answer that. Because we are all individuals and we all deal with our shit in different ways. But I found out this was a way that worked. And I used it a couple of times since then with good results, actually pretty good results. But just sinking down in apathy, it doesn't really do much, does it? One has to act on one's indignation and one's rage and do something, use that energy. Because rage and indignation does give you a lot of energy. It gave me energy to fight this political system that has been in place for, at that time, like 30, 35 years out there in the countryside, and I fought it and I won, and I beat the fucking crap out of them. And when there was election out there for the council, the town council, 9 of the 13 council members didn't get re-elected, thanks to me. And I got a little help. Like 30% of the things were from the NGO that I was talking about. But most of it was me, alone, all fucking alone, because none of the other unemployed people out there had the guts or the energy or the surplus in their lives to do what I did, or even to help me. I did it. All by myself, all by my lonesome. I tell you, it was fucking tough. Because at the beginning, nobody believed me. Everybody thought I was fucking crazy, that I was exaggerating, and that the system was not that bad, and blah, 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 blah. In the end, that town hall closed down almost everything they did with the unemployed, because all of it was actually more or less against the law, or at least questionable when it comes from the normal moral standards of the Danish society. And they had to rethink the whole thing. How to handle the unemployed, how to handle people who drink too much, how to handle people who have social problems. I did that. Just think about it. Peace. Don't panic.